This is the A class, and Huck was just answering a question that I had in our exam review about what is the chief theme of the prologue, and as I was doing this, I was also trying to listen. It covers a lot of people. It shows you the people who lived during the Middle Ages in England. That's important. People everywhere, but this is a particular place. So different kinds of people, different ages of people, different jobs. Yeah.
I think it kind of brings you into the story, kind of sets it off. You know, not to just go straight forward into something, but kind of to entertain you.
Yes, because the stories are told by these people. And it's always important. One of the chief things you learn about literature is you have to ask who's telling the story, who's the narrator. That's we have to ask that in poetry. You have to ask that about novels. Like, who is the narrator? That's one of the speaker. That is the first question you ask. And so he's answered that for us. Every one of those tales has a speaker, and who the speaker is determines a lot about what the tale is about and the message of the tale.
It just kind of, I guess, shows like what different members of like the Renaissance like valued and stuff, and I like that it like touches on how there was like corruption in the church and stuff,
Yeah.
And how like you had people like the monks and the nuns who like weren't really actually pious, but they kind of did it more for like the title, I guess, just to look and appear like they were like good people.
So if you had to say one thing beyond what we've just heard, it would be the church. That is probably one of the themes, not the only theme, but it's one of the chief themes of the entire prologue. We only read, the entire tales, and particularly the prologue. You get that real sense that this is the church age. I don't know if that's what they call it, but the Middle Ages, the church dominated everything. And so it did so poorly in some cases, so that's really important. Anything else, and you would need to go into detail, remember, compare people, contrast people, that's really important.
I guess like one parent contrast is like the squire and then his dad who's like the knight. Because like the squire was kind of like, I think, like kind of the character that I guess kind of reflected the most like good attributes, I guess, of the
Did you say the knight or the squire?
The squire, because like he was young, he was like a ladies man, he had like multiple interests, like he played the flute and like different things. I think he liked poetry, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
And then
Pretty sharp guy.
he wore like bright colored clothes and they were nice. And then his dad was kind of just like rugged and didn't really dress that nice, and it didn't really touch on that many interests other than he like was in battle a lot. So.
And the odd thing about that, it's not like the kids going to college in California and the dads in England, they actually work together. He is the squire for his dad. So and even then, look how different they are. You set that up well. They're very different people. And even though they work together all the time. And there's only one young person in the entire, except maybe the cleric. He's kind of a young person as well. You got two young people. Most people are older than that. Anyway, that's just touches on any other thoughts about it.
Is it medieval or Renaissance?
Well, this class goes up to have y'all studied the Renaissance in history?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's that transition past the Middle Ages, the Renaissance. It comes in, so we do incorporate that. Yeah.
So if we had to rank it, would it be like past the Black Death or during the Black Death, or?
Well, now that's more history. So for me, it's what you like the book. We're always focused on the book, and then you can incorporate some of the things you learn in history. And I would suggest you look at the moral lessons of the tales. I don't know, I can't remember what we said when, but the nun's priest tale, do you remember the moral of that? Didn't we talk about this yesterday?
No.
Okay, what is the moral of the nun's priest tale?
Wasn't it?
Yep,
Flattery?
yeah, it was. As you think back on that tale though, is that really the most important thing in that tale? No. And so, remember the speaker had to put in a moral, and that was the moral. But if you had to say, what is the real purpose of that tale? And I'm not sure it's even so much educational, in other words, or edifying or moral. Like if you think of the nun, my favorite of the ones we did, what's the, seems to be the chief purpose of it?
Just to entertain.
Yes, and yet in doing so, we learn some things about predestination and about dreams and about flattery, but those things are,
It's not like it's
Yeah.
trying to be like an influential, like, life-changing story at all.
About
It's just put in
flattery.
a context,
right,
you know?
but it's funny and it makes fun of a particular genre of literature, and it's entertaining. And all of them had to be entertaining and educational. And so just keep that in mind, what the Nun's Priest's Tale does. The others are much shorter, like let's go to the Physician's Tale. Do you remember the theme of that? I mean, moral of that?
Was that the one, okay, wait, that wasn't the one with the crooked, priest, right? That was,
No, I skipped the Friar's Tale. That would be the
Okay.
crooked Sumner and the crooked, the devil.
okay.
Yeah,
The
Hal.
moral of the physician was leave forsake your sins before they forsake you.
Yeah, and that's closer to what the meaning of the tale is, for sure. It's a pretty bad dude who did a bad thing and he paid for it. I just remember at the beginning though, he spends a lot of time talking about that girl. And not on how pretty she is, but how morally,
Like how
Up-
innocent, or was
yes.
it innocent?
yeah, that's a good word for it. Morally innocent and upright she is. What do you think what is this point? It's spending so much time on her. The story itself was actually maybe just even shorter than the description of the girl, yeah.
Was he personally taken with someone like that?
Well,
Or was
maybe
he like
so.
musing about his personal love?
Maybe so. I think part of that was, I don't know, I mean, we're getting into a little bit more complicated, but I just think it was also to show what moral uprightness looks like. You know, here's a girl, probably, I mean, she seemed like she was morally perfect, which nobody is, even 14-year-old girls. No offense, ladies, but we all are sinful from the beginning. But this girl seemed like too perfect, and which is a good thing, but it almost gives us a picture of what that would look like, yeah.
It also though, like, provides like really good contrast and makes the villain look even worse for like,
Yeah.
for trying to like take her from the father,
Right.
right? And like, it ultimately adds more like, kind of like violation to the story, or like, makes the villain stronger, like more of a like loathed character as he should be, and it just generally have more like to it, you know?
Yeah, that is a really good point. Why do you make the villain really bad? So you can, your Beowulf or your Roland, if he beats a weakling, that's nothing to be proud of. But if he beats somebody that's as strong as he is or stronger, that's a good point. That contrast, really, really bad, really, really good, that makes it more appealing. And finally, the Friar's Tale. Remember what the theme was?
It was like, to not fall into the temptation of the devil.
Yes, and to pray that the devil, and of course, what was the other purpose of it? What was like the speaker's purpose for telling the story was to do what? Do you remember what the,
Entertain? Is that,
what?
wait, entertain, like we said?
Well,
before?
yeah,
Well, it was to like trash the other guy,
that-
right?
that's it.
Yeah,
Very
I
good.
forgot what his name was.
the friar was trying to
Euban?
trash the Sumner.
Oh, yeah.
Because the main character in the Friar's Tale is a Sumner. I'm glad we didn't read the Sumner's Tale, because then you would be really confused. The main character in the Friar's Tale is the Sumner, and he was trying to make him look good. You said about the devil, how bad is the Sumner? Didn't we say this yesterday? How bad is he? This is what makes it so funny in an odd way. The Sumner is so bad that he is worse than who?
Devil?
The devil, which is of course impossible. But remember, he said, okay, devil, he roll up his sleeve, I'll show you how to do it. I'm gonna teach
Oh,
this
yeah,
lady.
he tricked
Yeah,
the lady,
let me- yeah, the widow, I'm gonna teach you a few things about stealing. And that's really clever, because the speaker is trying to make Sumners look really bad. Sumners are worse than the devil. You'd be better off with the devil than the Sumner. So that's part of the entertainment and humor and irony of it. I like stories that have ironic endings.
Oh, wait, how did it end? It's like, I remember he like tricked himself. himself even though he thought he was tricking the woman? Because, how did
Well,
he-
yeah, remember, he said, may the devil take me if I don't steal from this woman, and the devil says, do you mean it? And, well, actually, that was the widow said, may the devil take him, and he said, do you mean it? He said, yes, I mean it, so he did, the devil took it. So anyway, make sure you review those. How about Henry V? Do we need to review this, take a look at it? This would be a great way to compare, say, betrayal in Henry V and betrayal in Peace Trial. It'd be a great question. How are they alike? How are they different? They're mostly alike. But do you remember the leadership skills of Henry V? Just test yourself here, just a minute. Yeah.
He is a good speaker, he is encouraging, he's down to earth, like grounded, he has like, good values and generally like portrayed in like a really good light, you
Yeah.
know? That there's not much he does that is like low, shallow, like, petty, you know? He's just kind of like noble and good king.
And Shakespeare probably makes him better than he really
For
is,
sure.
just like
That's what I was-
Shakespeare made Brutus look better than he really is in Julius Caesar. Dante didn't like Brutus. There may be people that don't like Henry V. There may be people. But yeah, all those things that you just mentioned, I know when I'm sitting in the back listening to you, I'm thinking, okay, those are great. Do you have evidence for them? I'm always impressed by people who have evidence, because that means they know what they're talking about.
Like, he came back, like, Henry came back to, like, stand up for, like, his, like, the people, like, isn't that Canterbury? Isn't that the place where they live? Or
No,
something?
remember, you're talking about Henry V.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
remember
he-
they're in France.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Getting the two confused, sorry. Two different. But he, like, stood up for, like, his people, and, like, even though he knew that there might be a punishment from, like, the, like, higher authorities, like, that's kinda how he was, like, down to earth.
Are you thinking about Thomas Becket and murder, when he came back from
Oh, am I
England?
thinking of that?
Is that what you were thinking?
Maybe.
Well, I thought you
I knew
were,
someone did that.
okay, but I thought you were saying that he was, of course he was fighting for England, but remember, who did he also want to protect?
Oh, Henry the.
Who did Henry want to protect in France as he was fighting the French? He wanted to protect the French, and why did he want to protect them?
Oh, because he wanted to build a trust with them, right?
Yes, he was gonna rule them. He didn't wanna spend the next however many years with dealing with rebellion and all of that. All right, so that would be the thing I would add to what Huck said, and I'm not gonna make anybody say anything more, but that was a really good list. You would just need to be able to support it by saying, and that shows me that you really know it.
This is how.
And that's when you're gonna get a really good grade from me. Remember, this is 20 points out of your written, so you wanna get all 20 if possible.
I feel like a lot of it is like knowing the material and giving examples.
Yeah, it always is. Do you know what you're talking about? Do you know these books? Do you know them well? Then it doesn't matter what I ask. If whatever I ask, you're gonna be able to answer it. What does the book tell us about war? That was one that I always like. That's what, did you say, AGLL, which is what Sherman called it, the American general. But in this case, you're saying that it's costly. So how is it costly, John Carter?
Because,
Who lost things? What did it cost Henry? What did it cost the French?
well, like, I do a lot of things. It cost
Tell me
them,
something.
well, it cost them soldiers, it cost them land, it cost them money to pay for the soldiers.
Right. Now, what do you mean it cost them land? The French or the
Because,
British?
The French law.
Right.
Yes, so that means that the French lost land because the
Right, war.
British took it over.
And it cost them, 10,000, the number
Yeah.
Shakespeare gave, it cost 10,000 to the best people. What did it cost the English and Henry? What?
I think it was like 50 or.
Yeah, it's not a lot, it's actually 30.
Yeah.
But so that's not a big cost for a tremendous win, but what did it cost him? Can you think of something that he did pay?
Oh, his friend, he lost his
And,
friend.
He
like,
did.
Family members.
Excellent. What were you gonna say, John Carter? What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say money, because you have to pay for everything.
Probably did. The text didn't stress that, but yeah, that makes sense. So, yeah.
Oh, no.
Well, I was gonna say, remember, the question's probably gonna deal with the motivations. What do people want when they go to war? They go for particular reasons. And how about you?
Well, I know, well, the actual soldiers went because they want like the praise of being more like surviving, and plus even if you die, you'll still have like a good memory to look off of. I remember the bishops wanted it because they were about to raise the taxes in the
Yeah.
church, and they didn't want to give that, so they like said, oh, you should go fight this war, so they could like postpone it a little bit. And
Right.
this is another reason to fight that.
And you, the first one you said was the glory.
Yeah, the glory.
Yeah, the
praise.
speech.
If you
Say-
like die or not.
Yeah, the St. Crispin speech, you know, we get all the people will remember us years from now. We'll be sitting around talking about it, and they'll toast us. Yeah.
I kind of have a question.
Yeah.
But also, so, and then I was gonna answer, but, who describes war as hell exactly?
It's Sherman, the
Sherman.
American General Sherman. He's the one who started, well, in Tennessee, but he started in Atlanta and marched to the coast and burned everything in his sight. You will study that with her in 2 years, with Ms. Roberts. You'll study the American Civil War.
Then I was also gonna say, like, I think of, when you were saying, why do people go to war? Like, I was thinking of Pistol and the three, like, petty thieves almost, like, they went to, like, almost get rich, almost, you know, and like, go to France not to so much fight for their country and die like a noble death, but instead just like gain.
In fact, they don't want to fight at all.
Right.
They don't even want to fight, and 2 of them die anyway. If you don't add that to the 30 that was killed, isn't that odd, ironic? They don't want to fight, and yet they still died. Had they gone to fight, they might have lived. It was more likely for them to live because very few of the English were killed. But when they stole, it was a sure bet they were going to die. So that's kind of another irony. Anyway, reasons why people go to war, glory and money are 2 of them. That's a great question. And of course, the betrayal aspect, which fits in with Peace Child. I thought we mentioned this, but who betrays whom? Yeah.
And Peace Child?
Let's start with Henry.
Oh, and Henry, okay, okay, wait. Well,
It's not as big a deal in Henry as it is in Peace Child, but there is an element of that.
I don't know if his friends did in a way because they broke the law that he'd set in place.
Well, you could flip that too, and what
And say that he killed.
he betrayed them.
Yeah, but the thing is that like, I feel like going into it, I don't know if they expected him to like not punch
Yeah,
them equally.
right.
And they were just like, oh, you'll like vouch for us.
Yeah.
But they kind of like broke the law knowing what the punishment was.
Yes,
So I think in a way that's not really betrayal, it's just him following through with his word.
that's a really good answer. Yeah, that's a really good way to put that. Remember, they think he betrayed Falstaff, his buddies betrayed him, and he had to hang them. I mean, I'm talking about the 3 guys that wanted to kill him. He also had to hang, and you mentioned, it's not really betrayal. He had to hang his 2 friends. And contrast, this is a big one. The next 2 are kind of together. Contrast, remember, this is talking about scenes in particular that are back to back, and they are different, right? They're different, but they're connected to each other.
Okay, there was like one scene where like all the, basically I guess like royals were like, or nobility were arguing, about the war, and then the next scene is, Catherine trying to learn, like, she's trying to learn English or French?
She's trying to learn like
English, yeah, she's trying to learn English, and with like Alice, and she's just like mispronouncing things like in a like goofy way. So it's like an intense scene and then a huge.
Yes, and the intense scene, and let's, I'm just looking at the clock, we're here till 10:30, let's go to 15 after. If you have further questions, you can ask them, or we can wait till tomorrow. So, we're here till 10:30, so that'll give you 15 minutes to sign your books or anything like that. And I hope you're listening, because that was a good answer. That scene was when Henry threatened atrocities against that city, and then you have that silly scene. So, comic relief, you wanna call it, in intensity, they're back to back, yes.
Oh, I was just gonna ask what the question was. but-
Yeah, we're talking about contrast in scenes. Another example would be the French at the end of the book are boasting, and Henry is walking through his camps, but people are not boasting, they're thinking, they're quiet, they're not making any sound. At one point, somebody says to be quiet, it's too loud, and because they can hear the French over there. So that's another example of contrast. You got bunches of others. You got Henry fighting against England, France at the end of Act 1, saying the tennis ball thing, and then the very next scene you have Pistol and Nim fighting each other. So that's similar, but also very different. Just two people fighting each other. It's still the same as two countries fighting each other in some ways. And then remember the class-national interactions. How the French and those scenes where you have the French and the British interacting and stuff, not just fighting the war, that's too broad, but specific scenes where, even anytime Montjoy shows up, he shows up as the representative of the French, he's talking to Henry, and then you got the 5 officers who are all different nationalities.
Would one be like when Henry was like undercover and he met with William?
Absolutely, and he speaks in prose. That's another way to highlight that. There's more, and then finally, yeah.
This is kind of frustrating to know this, but why is it so important, the differences in the class and international? Why is it so important to know that?
It's not so much to know it, it's what we're seeing. It's one of those books that highlights those interactions. Shakespeare was the one who kind of highlights it by showing, and he does that in a lot of his plays, because who's in the audience?
A mix of people.
Right, and so he wants to give everybody something. He gives them something to cry about, he gives something to laugh about, he gives the groundlings people that talk like they do, and then they have the noble people that talk more like they do and act. So that's part of the reason he does it, and I think it highlights also Henry's leadership skills. I think I said this, if you want to be a leader, yes, I don't know if that's something you want to be, I think you're almost born as a leader, but good leaders know people, and they know the people they work with. So, get to know the guy that comes in and fixes your plumbing. He might be richer than you are, those guys make really good money, but get to know those people, the people at McDonald's who, give you your meal. I really respect people who are nice to everybody. They respect everybody, and that's sort of Henry's ability. He can work with anybody. If you only know your little group and you can only work with them, you're just limiting yourself, because it's a big world out there, and it really helps if you know all kinds of people. That's really helpful. You realize that I'm not better, I'm also not worse than other people. We're kind of all people. Just went to a reunion this weekend. I mentioned that, my wife's 50th anniversary, 50th high school reunion, and she just pointed out some people haven't changed in 50 years. She knows that too because of Facebook. She sees some of the interactions. People are still kind of talking. Did you see so and so? And you see what so and so was wearing, and you see what happened to so and so. And then other people, of course, have grown and changed, but you don't want to be the person that's still stuck in middle school the rest of your life. That's fortunately over and pretty quickly, middle school, and so is high school. And finally, the Inferno, and we just got about 3 minutes, and then you can do what you need to do. The rationale, did we go over this at all? I can't remember. All right, what do I mean by that? I think in my mind of that list that I put up last week, where it starts with the vestibule and ends with the 4th circle of hell, the 9th circle of hell, the 4th region. And I think, why are these here? Because the descending order, or if that's what it is, these are less punished and less sinful than these. They're all in hell. But there is a degree of intensity of punishment and of severity. Why? Why are these sins? I'm pointing to, say, the violence. Why is violence less important than fraud? There's a reason for that. Why fraud is worse than violence? Why is incontinence not as bad as violence? And so that's what I mean by rationale. Can you explain the order of the circles? You can't talk about every circle, there are 24 sins. There are 9 circles, but you could talk about groups: incontinence, violence, and fraud. Why are they in that order? Why can't it be fraud, incontinence, and violence? The order's Just like yesterday, I was bragging about you guys all day yesterday, because we started with that verse, and I said, my ninth grade class, they did this. I pointed out how somebody mentioned the verbs, and several of you mentioned the order, and I said, that is really good analysis. So order matters. And when you write, order should matter. Sometimes it doesn't matter. You got three things, it doesn't matter which comes first. But a lot of times it does matter. And so you need to put the most important thing. By the way, a little trick about writing, when you write, particularly sentences, the most important thing usually comes first. So if you don't wanna read something real carefully, and you only wanna skim it, read the first half of the sentences. Like, this is not for a test, you just wanna figure out what's going on here. Read the first half, because the way we write sentences, we put the subject first, the verb second, and the object third. Almost 90% of all sentences are written that way, and I'm making that statistic up, so I have no idea what that would mean, but the vast majority of sentences are written subject, verb, and object. If you wanna just skim it, read the first half of it. Find out what the subject and what he's doing, and then you don't have to read the other details. But that's true about pretty much anything, as a rule. So what comes first, here, it's a little different. Here, he switches that. The least important thing comes first, and the most important thing comes last. So you gotta be aware of that. So that was a really good analysis, and that's what we mean by rationale. And quickly, the sins and their punishments, be able to explain, like 4, 5, 6. Why is this punishment for that sin? What's the connect? What do we learn about the sin from the punishment? And then the Inferno as allegory. This is about the fact that why does he happen to go through hell? Remember, you need to define allegory. We can do this tomorrow. We don't have to do it today. But be able to define allegory and show how the dark woods represent something, and the three animals represent something, and the mountain represents something, and why is he going through hell? What does hell represent for him? And what about purgatory and so forth? So I'll give you the next 15. You can work among yourselves. You can look at the yearbook, whatever, and just remember tomorrow's our last day together. So you gotta ask your questions.
Just do a couple of them. What is that? You said if you're